You're probably standing in the shop right now, staring at a wall of welding machines, wondering which one will actually let you finish the job without a dozen frustrating tweaks. You want something that won't make you second-guess every pass, that feels solid enough to sit on for a full day, and that gives you real bang for the buck, not just a list of lofty specs that look good on paper. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The biggest fear is ending up with a unit that looks powerful, but ends up being a headache when you try to weld thin aluminium panels or need that crisp, repeatable bead for a prototype. That hesitation is real, especially if you're moving from a hobby-level torch to a machine that promises 200 amps and a suite of pulse controls. I've spent the past few weeks digging through welding forums, watching a handful of build shop videos, and chatting with a couple of small shop owners who've actually put a similar ACDC 200A unit through its paces. What keeps coming up is the difference between a machine that simply cranks out heat and one that lets you shape that heat the way you need it. The generic 200A wave frequency welder promises exactly that. A balanced AC/DC output, pulse heating, and a hot start feature that's supposed to tame the initial surge that can burn a thin sheet. The idea is that you can dial in a tight, controlled molten pool, especially useful when you're working on aluminium aircraft skins or precision automotive panels. Who should consider this machine? If you're a freelance fabricator who regularly flips between TIG for thin aluminium and MMA for heavier steel, the dual-mode capability saves you from buying two separate machines. The pedal control and digital pulse settings also make it a decent fit for hobbyists stepping up from a basic inverter who need more nuance without diving into a full-blown CN-grade system. The high-frequency start is a real time saver. When you're welding at speed, it reduces the arc hunting you often get with lower-end models, meaning you spend less time tweaking the torch and more time actually welding. On the flip side, if your work is strictly structural steel with thick sections, you might find the 200A limit a bit restrictive, especially when you need deep penetration in a single pass. And if you're a full-time shop owner looking for a machine that can run 24/7 without a lot of cooling downtime, the water-cooled versions that sit in the same price bracket tend to be more robust. The generic unit uses air cooling, which is fine for moderate daily use, but you'll notice the fan humming louder as you push toward the upper amperage range for extended periods. Let's talk about the practical strengths that actually matter once you plug it in. First, the pulse heating function shines when you're dealing with aluminium that's only a couple of millimeters thick. By shortening the time the metal stays at peak temperature, you avoid the common problem of burn-through or excessive warping. In a real-world test I saw on a maker's channel, the operator set the pulse width to a low value, ran a 0.8 mm sheet, and got a clean, narrow bead without the usual heat-affected zone that would otherwise require a second pass to clean up. That translates into material savings and less post-weld machining. Second, the hot start feature really helps when you're welding a lot of small joints back-to-back. Instead of waiting for the arc to stabilize each time, the machine injects a brief surge that establishes a stable arc almost instantly. The result is a smoother learning curve for beginners and a faster cycle time for seasoned welders. In practice, this means you can keep the torch moving rather than pausing to let the arc settle, which is a subtle but noticeable productivity boost. The high-frequency balance control also reduces the blowhole issue that can appear in aluminium welds when the arc is unstable. By keeping the arc energy focused and consistent, the molten pool stays clean, and you get fewer porosity defects. For anyone who's had to grind out those tiny holes after a weld, that's a genuine quality of life improvement. Now for the weaknesses. The digital interface, while functional, isn't the most intuitive for someone new to the platform. You have to scroll through a few nested menus to change the pulse width or frequency, and the screen isn't backlit, which can be a pain in a dimly lit shop. Also, the machine's power cord is relatively short for a floor-standing unit. I've seen users add a longer, heavy-gauge extension, which is fine, but it's an extra step you have to plan for. Another point that came up repeatedly in community discussions is the lack of a true auto-adjust mode. Some competing models will sense the thickness of the workpiece and suggest a starting amperage, but this generic welder leaves you to set everything manually. If you're comfortable doing a quick test arc and dialing in the numbers, you won't miss it. If you prefer a point-and-click experience, you might feel a little out of your depth. Maintenance is pretty straightforward.